Alright, Happy New Year, everyone, and thank you for sticking with me throughout such a tumultuous 2020. So, hello, it is Mason11 here, and I am bringing you my 2021 NFL playoff predictions. Alright, so, as usual, we will go over the playoff teams. So, in the AFC, we got Kansas City Chiefs finishing with the first round bye at a 14-2 record, or as our hockey fans like to say, they're the President's Trophy winner of this NFL season. Moving on, we got the Buffalo Bills, 13-3, also returning to the playoffs like last year, but this time they got their first home game in a couple decades, as far as I remember. I don't know the year off the top of my head, but it's been 20 plus. I know that for a fact. Anyway, moving on to what we got now. We're on the third seed, Pittsburgh Steelers at 12-4. Fourth seed, Tennessee Titans 11-5. Baltimore Ravens 11-5. Cleveland Browns 11-5. And the Indianapolis Colts at 11-5. And I gotta say, this AFC has been very damn good this year, as I think we can all agree on that. Last time I think we had a 7th seed, the 7th seed in the playoffs didn't exist back then, but I remember when the Patriots, in 2008 they finished 11-5, but theoretically would have been the 7th seed had there been 7 playoff teams. So it's been quite a while since we've seen a force like this, and not even to mention the Dolphins would have been 8th in the conference, but also finished with 10 plus wins. So it's been a very unique kind of year, to say the very least. But considering 2020, I guess that's just what you gotta expect nowadays. Anyway, so now we'll go to the NFC as usual. So in the number 1 seed, we got the Green Bay Packers returning to the playoffs again. We got the New Orleans Saints returning with a 12-4 record. The Seattle Seahawks also with a 12-4 record returning. And then the Washington football team with a 7-9 record winning the NFC East. I think we can all agree that the whole NFC East was a complete shambles this year, and how just disoriented and chaotic it all was. If you saw my standings predictions back in September, I predicted the Washington football team to finish 2-14 and land Trevor Lawrence with the first pick in the NFL draft. And all I gotta say is it's just the Alex Smith effect. The story is unbelievable. I think we all agree on that, and just how it's just transpired all the way up to such a turnaround up to where he's actually going back to the playoffs again. I still think, even as a Cowboys fan, had Alex Smith been healthy in 2018, I think the then Redskins, now football team, would have won the NFC East that year too. Not to get off track though, we'll move along. Tampa Bay Buccaneers with the first wild card, 11-5, ending the second longest playoff drought. Forgot to say earlier, the Cleveland Browns ended the longest playoff drought, which was 18 years, I believe. Yeah, 2002. The 2002 season was their last one, and it was 2020 that they returned. Buccaneers, their last one was 2007, so it's been a good 13 years for them. What else we got? And then wild cards, we got the Rams at 10-6 and the Bears at 8-8. All right, so before I begin my actual bracket, like I have normally done on my channel for the past couple years, I'm gonna do one thing real quickly that I haven't done, but it's actually my awards predictions. I just decided just to include them for kind of just kicks, but I always had them in my standings predictions videos, so I thought, why not just bring in here too, since it also gets revealed during the playoff season. Most valuable player, Aaron Rodgers. Just that touchdown to interception ratio, I think it's just going to be the icing on the cake. As great as Patrick Mahomes has been, I think we just have to give it to Aaron Rodgers this year. And then moving on to the Offensive Player of the Year, Derrick Henry, and I will be really mad if he does not get it after a 2,000-yard season. That alone should put you, if you get a 2,000-yard rushing season, that alone should put you in the MVP talks. That's how Adrian Peterson won the MVP back in 2012. Anyway, so then we go to Defensive Player of the Year, and I got TJ Watt. Now, this one was actually very difficult to choose between Watt and Aaron Donald, but I went with Watt just because he's kind of just more flexible, and he's been dominant more areas on defense than Donald. Not to say that Aaron Donald's one-dimensional. I just think TJ Watt kind of just brings another dimension to the Steelers defense than Donald does to the Rams defense. Anyway, now we can go to the Rookie of the Year. So on the offense, Justin Jefferson, most receiving yards by a rookie in history. That alone should do it. Justin Herbert's been a beast this year too, but but the fact that Jefferson's rookie season's been unprecedented, I think that will have to take it. Defensive Rookie of the Year, Chase Young, this past December was definitely what got him over the hump above players like Julian Blackmon and Jeremy Chin, for example. And I believe he actually won Defensive Player of the Month too, for December, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. I have to double check, but I do believe he did win that award. Anyway, so Comeback Player of the Year, I think there's no question here. Alex Smith. Let's just move on. We all know the story. Coach of the Year, Kevin Stefanski, and we got a couple options here between Stefanski, Brian Flores of the Dolphins, and Ron Rivera of the football team. I think Stefanski's just made the most positive impact and just how much of a turnaround after just such a disastrous season the Browns had in 2019 when expectations were them to be where they are this year, and how Stefanski has actually brought them to that after what I thought was one of the most undisciplined teams of the 2019 season. And then finally, Assistant Coach of the Year, Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans. This one was actually kind of hard to pick just because it wasn't like we had like a dominant. I just didn't think we had like any Greg Romans of last year or Wade Phillips defense for like the Broncos and Vic Fangio's defense coordinator of the Bears that couple years. But I went with Arthur Smith just because of considering how he was in the running for it last year, and I just think he made the Titans offense even better than it was before, and how Derrick Henry has transcended into what looks like a perennial all-pro, just like we have like with him being like almost the only like old school 80s and 90s running back being the quote quarterback of your offense. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's go to my actual bracket. So I believe the first matchup is... What was the first matchup? I don't even remember. I believe it was the Colts at the Bills. I hope that's right because I have to redo this if it's not. But anyway, so going with the Colts and the Bills, my prediction... There's a reason why I paused. My prediction, Colts. Yes. Indianapolis Colts upset Buffalo Bills, one of the hottest teams in the AFC. I know I'm going to get a shitload of dislikes. I'm already prepared. And Buffalo is the last team I want to see get upset in the playoffs. The city of Buffalo does not deserve this at all. I just want to see them make a deep run and just revive the whole city as they've kind of been doing. Start with just how amazing Josh Allen's been this season. But as to why I'm picking the Indianapolis Colts, it's just the experience factor of Phillip Rivers and how he's always. And I think he's just always been the type of guy that knows how to get it done in playoffs. Like in both of his wild card appearances in the 2010s, he beat the Bengals and he beat the Ravens. And not to mention, I think the Colts defense is going to be, it's going to definitely be challenged, but I think it'll be able to uphold the Bills offense more than the Bills defense will do with the Colts offense. And another big part of the reason why I think the Colts are a sneaky pick is Jonathan Taylor. And the way I kind of compare Jonathan Taylor is to kind of like how Derrick Henry back in the 2017-18 playoffs, how the Titans kind of finally utilized him in the big game, they were able to upset the Chiefs in the wild card. And I think the Colts might have just figured how to do that with Taylor in Week 17. So I'm going to go bold. All right. I apologize, but I don't want to mess this up and have to do another take. I prepared this without kind of doing even any like rehearsals. So I'm just going to check the NFL playoff schedule real quick just so I don't accidentally say something I mistake. Okay, so the next game is Rams versus Seahawks. So yeah, I remember the teams I picked. I just didn't remember the order of the game. So anyway, Rams versus Seahawks. This one was kind of easy for me to predict. I'm going with the Seattle Seahawks just because I think there's too many questions on the Rams right now. I've seen people say they kind of thought John Wolford was actually a pretty reliable, in a sense, quarterback, just one that was a bit of a game player. I personally disagree with that take. I just think people kind of got that view after like just seeing how he was better than Chris Streveler, the backup for the Cardinals, which undoubtedly He was way better, but I didn't think John Wolford showed me anything that would convince me he would be able to beat a Russell Wilson-led Seahawks team if supposing Jared Goff is going to be missing tomorrow's game. I haven't checked the injury report, but I do think that was going to be from last time I looked at it. I did think that was going to be the ultimatum. And then moving on, we had the football team hosting the Buccaneers, and then for that game, I am picking the road Tampa Bay Buccaneers to defeat the Washington football team. As great of a story the football team has been with Alex Smith, I just think Tom Brady and the Buccaneers defense, I think this is probably not even like in a sense, an upset type of pick just because they're away, but like, I think just Tom Brady and just the experience and the defense that the Buccaneers have just developed, it's going to be too much for the football team's offense to handle. And as good as the Washington's D has been, I think the Buccaneers' offensive line has definitely transformed and improved big time this past season, and I think it'll be able to hold your guys like Chase Young and Montez Sweat. So then we go to the Sunday games of the wild card, and the first one there is Ravens at the Titans. This one is actually a pretty challenging one for me to predict. Both teams have very good offenses but suspect defenses. In the past couple of matchups, though, we saw the Titans beat the Ravens on the road in the past two games in a row, one being the divisional round in last playoffs, and then this season, like in the middle of the season, I don't remember what week, but the Titans won that game in overtime. And before the Titans had, but it was when the Titans won that game against the Ravens this season, that was before Lamar Jackson, in my opinion, was rejuvenated as the type of borderline MVP type quarterback we're used to seeing. In December, he was hot. But in all honesty, though, I just don't think the Ravens have shown me anything that can convince me that they're ready to that they make me comfortable to beating a team like the Titans yet. I do think the Ravens are actually one of the strongest teams in the AFC. However, I think the same thing about the Titans, and just kind of going with the recency bias here, I just trust the Titans more than the Ravens, so I will be taking the Titans, and I think that's an upset pick when you look at if you look at like the spread line and the odds. So who knows? Maybe I'll bet money on that. Well, I usually don't bet anyways. All right, moving along. Then it's let's see, the 4:00 game for Sunday is Bears at Saints. This one was the easiest for me to predict. The Bears are just too mediocre, and I don't know even kind of what their quarterback situation is. Although I can actually see it'll be Mitchell Trubisky, but just all the hype that Nick Foles has gotten in the playoffs, I just think it's gonna be like, I just don't think a team that is kind of just unsure of like which quarterback to start for the playoffs. In a sense, although I do think, in my opinion, I do think it would be Trubisky, but just knowing Foles' history, I think that's just going to cause a little too much of a distraction. Along with the fact that I think Drew Brees is going to just dominate the Bears defense as well. Not that the Bears defense is bad, but it's nothing like it was 2 years ago. So, long story short, it will be the Saints. And they will, as a result of winning the Bears game, they will be hosting the Seahawks. And then the last one, we have Browns at Steelers. And not to mention, in Week 17, they had a very good game, but that was with the Steelers starting Mason Rudolph and resting a bunch of other guys, and the Browns, I thought, would have been able to beat them by a bigger margin than they did. And on top of that, it looks like Kevin Stefanski is going to be missing this game. So I don't really know what to expect from the Browns. And just, even if they, and not to mention, even if Kevin Stefanski was going to be coaching this game, I just think this is kind of the year where the Browns are going to be just dipping their feet in the water after returning to the playoffs. Kind of like how Josh Allen and the Bills last year's playoffs, like against the Texans, they'll put up a fight, but I just think they're too raw for me to actually predict them to make a run. So I will be going with the Steelers, and thus they will be hosting the Titans, with the Colts going to the Chiefs. All right, so that brings us to the divisional round, and for now we don't know what games the NFL or the order of the schedule. But what I have done is just kind of going in order of the AFC and the NFC. So to begin, Colts at Chiefs. Even if the Colts, with the Colts even getting a big victory against the Bills, I don't think they'd be able to handle the Chiefs. It's just the Patrick Mahomes effect that we all know, and I think if the Colts were actually able to upset the Bills, I don't think they would be actually making a Cinderella run. So just to put a long story short, Chiefs I will be picking. I picked one upset, but I will not be picking the Colts to make another upset. And then the other AFC game is Titans at Steelers. And this one actually would be a really interesting matchup just because of kind of how kind of different sides of the spectrum that these two football teams are. But regarding the Pittsburgh Steelers, they've just had just so much. I know this is again a recency bias, but just after starting 11-0, they just completely kind of just crashed, and it just looked like the team was vulnerable, unlike in the beginning of the year. Well, granted, they did struggle against a couple weak teams, my Cowboys being an example, but I just feel like when it came to them going up against playoff teams, they weren't the dominant force that I kind of had expected. And the Titans, on the other hand, after last year's playoff run, I think they know exactly how to make another playoff run again. Granted, that's actually a very broad thing to say, but if you get my point. Tannehill, Henry, Mike Vrabel, Arthur Smith all have been in this situation before. It won't be a kind of new environment going out on the road to win more games and make the run, but I will be thinking that they're going to have history repeat itself, and the Titans will have a rematch against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship. Alright, so going to the NFC Divisional, we have first the Buccaneers at the Packers. Keep in mind, the Buccaneers absolutely dominated the Packers early in the offseason. I remember that killing my fantasy team with Aaron Rodgers starting. I still have a grudge against that, but anyway, I think when it comes to the Green Bay Packers, they're going to be the team that's going to benefit the most from home field advantage up in Lambeau Field, especially where it's very stark weather difference compared to Tampa Bay. And I know that's kind of cheesy, but at the same time, I think Rodgers and the Packers will be a lot more prepared for the Buccaneers defense, and will be able to avoid a lot of those sloppy plays that contributed to the blowout loss earlier in the regular season. And that was kind of before Aaron Rodgers was kind of being considered as the number one MVP. In my opinion, back then it was kind of just it was the debate between Mahomes and Russell Wilson. So I think the Packers are a much better team than they were back then, and I think they're in a much needed home field environment compared to then as well. So I think this one will be a different result compared to that, and it will be the Packers defeating the Buccaneers. Now, don't count out the Buccaneers. They're actually one of my very sneak teams to make a run, because they're very balanced on both sides of the ball, and they are a team that can, I think, even make can easily make the championship, or the NFC Championship, at least I should say, as a wild card. So with that being said, we'll go to our final divisional round matchup, and it's the Seahawks visiting the Saints. This one was definitely very tricky for me to predict, as both offenses are definitely led by two Hall of Fame caliber quarterbacks. Russell Wilson and Drew Brees have all been in this stage numerous times throughout their careers, and they know how to do it. But a big thing about the Saints is that at this point in the playoffs, I believe Alvin Kamara and the other assets of the running back personnel will be returning to the playoffs after finishing the COVID protocols. And not to mention, I think the Saints have a far better defense than the Seattle Seahawks. So I am a lot more comfortable picking the Saints right now. Even though in the past couple of playoff years, I've been repeatedly picking the Saints to make deep playoff runs, and I've been disappointed, especially last year where they got lost to the Vikings, but I guess I haven't learned my lesson. So anyway, I have the Saints going to the Packers. Alright, and that brings us our championship matchups, and it's And coincidentally, it's 3 of the 4 same teams last year, but the New Orleans Saints instead of the San Francisco 49ers. We will begin with the AFC again, and this is Titans versus Chiefs. Now, this is definitely if we get a rematch of the AFC Championship, I'm going to be looking forward to it a lot. Just if we can just kind of just a little helicopter image analysis, we know that the Titans defense is very suspect, and we know that Patrick Mahomes, whenever he's quarterbacking an offense, that offense is going to almost always light up a defense. I just have a gut feeling, though, about the Titans. Now, before I actually predict whether I'm going to predict the Titans to beat the Chiefs or not, the Titans are just a team that I feel like is always very boom or bust. And I feel like I don't know if anyone else viewing this kind of feels that way about them as well, but they're going to either look like, I just feel like from times, like a couple stretches, they're going to look like the best team or second best team in the AFC, and then right after, I suppose, a 3-week stretch of being that pinnacle team, they're going to definitely be, they look like an outsider in a playoffs team. Just like, if you think of like kind of how the stark differences between, like, as I previously said, the Titans being the Ravens, but then, for example, getting blown out to the Browns, I just feel like it kind of just, it just oscillates on a pendulum like that, back and forth. But in this sense, or in this scenario, the Titans would be continuing a hot streak. And I think just Derrick Henry, I think, is just writing himself an autobiography of being a great playoff football player, almost as if to kind of how we saw the electricity from Larry Fitzgerald about a decade ago, back when I started watching football, and I still remember how exciting he was. And I feel like Derrick Henry might be the closest person we've had to that hype since then. So I probably have kind of foreshadowed it by now, but yes, upset. Titans over the Chiefs, and the Titans go to the Super Bowl as a 4 seed. I do not remember off the top of my head the last time a 4 seed has made the Super Bowl, but it's probably been quite a long time. I think it's definitely been before I had started watching football. I'd have to double check though, but it's been quite some time. So who knows if laws of averages says it's due or not? But I think that's kind of a shit explanation as a prediction. But regardless, I still think the Titans are going to be one of the best offenses in this playoffs, and I think they're going to they might just even be able to outscore even players like Patrick Mahomes. And not to discredit the Chiefs, they're still the favorite to win the Super Bowl in my opinion, but I do think they've kind of been shaky the past December and and they just didn't dominate the way I have expected them. I'm not counting Week 17 when they were starting Chad Henne, but just the big thing that kind of sticks out to me is that Falcons-Chiefs game, and I just really was expecting a whole lot more out of the Chiefs' offense against a defense like Atlanta's. I feel like that's probably a generalization, but I just feel like that just gives me too many question marks for my liking. And I know that kind of logic doesn't really add up when you kind of compare the Titans to being upset against the Browns and not to mention getting blown out by the Packers as well. But the Titans, I feel like, are a team that's shown to be rebounding from that stuff, and I don't think I've seen that from the Chiefs, at least at this point, since they've kind of got shaky, for lack of a better term. Okay, so moving on to the NFC Championship, it's the Saints versus the Packers. I would absolutely kill for this matchup to be the NFC Championship, to have a Breeze versus Rodgers, especially right after having a Brady versus Rodgers and a Wilson versus Breeze. It's just the best thing you could ask for, with all 4 teams in the NFC divisional round having Hall of Fame quarterbacks. 2 of which in this NFC Championship are competing for a Super Bowl berth for the first time in over a decade. So just to go like this, we know that the Packers early in September defeated the Saints on the road, and I kind of think that might be. I think that game might kind of. What's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word. I don't know. Maybe I'll write it in the comments once I figure it out. But it'll just kind of be And like it kind of just might see. It might just be that week 2 or 3 game will kind of almost be like mirrored, I think, in the AFC Championship. So yeah, I do think the Packers will be able to take care of the Saints in this one. Um, I just trust them definitely a lot more with the couple of past games that they have shown me, and just the Saints have not shown me that they have been the type of team that's going to make a Super Bowl. And not to mention, even with Drew Brees most likely retiring after this, I really hate to pick against the Saints, especially in that type of year, but I'm going to have to do it. So, yes, I predict we will have a Green Bay Packers versus Tennessee Titans Super Bowl. And if this were happening to be the case, I think a lot of people are going to jump on the Titans bandwagon to predicting them to make an upset just because of how good they would have looked going into this game. Maybe as an analogy, almost as kind of how the Nashville Predators made the run to the Stanley Cup a few years ago, but and got a lot of hype, but then lost to the Pittsburgh Penguins. Just to use that as an analogy, I do think the Titans would be very competitive still against the Packers, and I do think they would play much better against them than they did in Week 16 or 15, I want to say. I don't remember the exact week, but you know the game I'm referring to. But in the end, I do think if this were to be the matchup, I do think the Green Bay Packers are going to take it and will be your 2020 to 2021 Super Bowl champions. All right, so that wraps it up. So thank you for sticking around and listening. If you've made it all the way up to the 26th minute, and I will catch you all later. So peace out. I don't know what team I want to endorse this year. I guess I'm gonna have to say go Bills because I shat on them earlier and right at the beginning of my playoff predictions. But I just don't want to. I just want to see the city of Buffalo. I just want to see that culture get a run that they totally deserve. So, this is Mason signing off. Go Bills.